Hey guys, welcome to another market focus. So as usual, the first thing we do is look at the trade recap before looking at the opportunities we have for next week. So I'm just going to pull up this real quick. So we had a couple of trades last week, and I think last week was pretty good, and compared to the previous week where we had lots of break evens and lots of losses, this week I think was a good one. So starting the week, so let's look. We had gold. So I had a selling opportunity on gold, and this was on the 3rd. So I had this initial attempt for a sell, so I took this sell position. I've moved my stops to break even at this point, and managing this sell position on gold was a little bit tricky because the sales didn't play out as expected, and so eventually I had to close the position on gold, and I think we secured about 0.9% on this position on gold. And the next one, let's look at the indices. So the attempt with indices, so this was on the 2nd. I had an initial attempt, and if you go through the previous analysis or the previous focus, you remember we was looking for these indices to make new highs, say NAS and the S&P500. So I had this initial buy attempt on NAS100. So eventually I closed this at the break even because I didn't like the price action at this point. And once price moved again, so on around the 5th, price was at this point, so I got in again on the buy. So I did a reattempt on the buy on NAS100 right here, and eventually we had our stop loss move to break even as usual just to secure the position. And eventually I closed this position here. So I had my stop loss move again to secure say 2.79%, and then we had a retracement from price, and it took me out on this one. So this was a plus 2.79% on NAS100. And on the S&P 500, so the limit order on this the previous week was cancelled, but let's come to this week. So we had this on the 5th. So the same move you had on NAS100, we had the same move on the S&P 500. I was looking for this to make new highs as well. So I took these buys on the S&P 500 here, and the trade management as usual. So I had my stop loss move to break even once the price started moving in my favor. And with this one, I closed this manually. So I closed this even without seeing the retracement on this one because of the price action wasn't favorable again for me. So I closed this at 3%. So 2.97% on NAS100, 3% on the S&P 500, 0.9% on gold. And on BTC, I had an attempt on BTC for the buys. So I had a buy attempt on BTC right here, and the trade management with this, once price started moving in my favor, I put my stops to break even as usual, and I secured say 0.38% at this point. And you can see there was this massive drop on BTC, and so eventually this took me out with me. So as I kept moving my stop loss, it took me out at say plus 1.18%. and after that I did a reattempt on the sales. So I did attempt the sales on this one, and I closed it at break even because I didn't like the price action. So let's look at gold because let's look at US30. So this is the one I had a loss on. So let's see on the 5th. So I had this attempt for the sell on US30. So once this started playing out, the trade closed I closed it at break even before. So I had two attempts on US30. I had this first one, I tried selling, I didn't like the price action, so I closed it. And then I did a reattempt again on this sales on Friday. I took the sales again, and it started moving a little bit, and then the news event came out and it just took me out, and that's fine. So 2.97% on NAS, 3% on S&P, 0.9% on gold, and maybe 1.18% on BTC. So that was a good week, and then a loss on US30. So let's see the opportunities we have for next week. All right, so as usual, the first thing we look at is just the DXY, and I'm going to start on the daily time frame just so we have a bigger picture as to what's happening on the DXY. I'll make this bigger. So if you look at the DXY, this is what we was expecting last week. So we expected these sales to come in and test say 104, and from here on, so once we had a test of 104, you can see there's an inability for price to go past 104, and again this psychological number is holding like pretty strong at this point, and we've had prices making lows and highs, so lower lows and lower highs, giving us this downtrend, and now we have price breaking out of this downtrend. So just staying on the daily time frame, you can tell with this massive move from the daily time frame on the DXY, we should expect prices to continue to the upside. Now the first area I'm looking at is this psychological number of 105. So this is what happened on Friday, this massive buy that came in on Friday. So now expecting, say, Monday, Tuesday and stuff like that, I'm expecting prices to test 105, and depending on what happens on 105, then it should give us an understanding as to what's going to happen during the week. So we might see prices get to 106, or depending on what happens on 105, we might see a rejection and for prices to come down lower again. So looking at this from the daily time frame, knowing that we are most likely going to test 105, and also knowing that we're coming in from this downtrend, the possibilities I'm looking at for the DXY is quite simple. If we get to 105 and there's a rejection at this point, so if we see sellers coming in, then we might see a pullback coming in on the DXY like this, and then eventually a move again to the upside from the buyers, simply because we've had this move to the downside, we've had a rejection at 104, and if we test 105 and we get, say, a weak reaction from the sellers at 105, we should see prices coming to the downside, and then eventually see buyers taking prices again to the upside. Now if we get to 105 at this point and we get a strong rejection from the sellers, then we might see prices tank again to the downside. So it just depends on what happens on 105. So moving forward, so if we step down to the 8-hour time frame, the same thing. So we just see price again downtrend, massive move from the buyers coming in from the price action on Friday, and so the area I'm looking at is a test of 105. Once we test 105, it's going to give us a clear understanding as to what is going to happen. So coming into next week, I'll be a little bit patient because we need more price action. And when you look at the move that happened on Friday, this massive move that came in, it means you need to be prepared for the pullbacks that is going to come in, because this move was massive as well. And if these pullbacks are going to come in and then we see the buyers continuing in that direction, we should see prices pulling down, and then eventually we'll see prices moving again to the upside. So if we have to pull back, I'm expecting again prices to test 105. We see a rejection at this point from the sellers, we could see this pullbacks coming in, and if the pullbacks end, or once the pullbacks end, we should see buyers taking prices again to the upside. Now this just depends again on what is going to happen on at this level of 105, and if eventually we get price moving in that direction, then we could see the DXY putting in something like this, so coming into next week. So 105, this level of 105 is a very important level for me. I'm going to watch it closely. So again, there's a possibility we might break through 105 coming into next week. So it's quite difficult to tell what is going to happen, but you can do the focus and then you wait and see what price gives you. So let's say coming into next week, we'll get a massive move like this. If price goes through 105 without really facing a lot of resistance at this point, then I'll be expecting a test again of 105 and subsequently this trend line, and we should then see prices moving to 106. Now if we get to 105 and these buyers can not really go past 105, if we get this rejection at 105 and price starts tanking, then we should expect prices again to come back to 104, and at this point you might say price is ranging at that point. So that's it for me with the DXY coming into next week. Again, if you move progressively to lower time frames like the 4-hour time frame, the price action remains the same. There's nothing that's different from what we've been seeing on the daily time frame, but the bigger picture from the daily time frame already tells you the downtrend has probably come to an end. You can see we had this move, we had this rejection at this point, or this consolidation. There was that difficulty for price to go past this point of 104, and we had buyers coming in. So now, because we had a rejection at 104, the most likely area price is going to test should be 105. Once we get a test of 105, we should see prices say rejecting and coming back down, and then we see prices moving again to the upside, and the next level we're going to test should be 106. If we get a rejection at this point and price starts tanking, we should see prices moving back to 104. So again, if you step down to the hourly time frame, it's going to be the same price action. Just now there's more, it's the same thing, but there's more price action. So, and that's it for me with the DXY. There's no need really stepping down to the hourly time frame. It's just going to give you more price action, but the story remains the same. So I'm going to put this right here, expecting a test of this area, get a pullback on area like this, and we should see prices moving again to the upside, get a test of this, and then most likely see prices going to 106. Now this only happens if this move that happened on Friday sustains. If it doesn't sustain, and then we should see prices tanking again to the downside. But primarily that's what I'm looking at. So maybe next week and the week after that, we should see this uptrend coming in from the DXY. If we cannot go past 105, I'm going to scratch on this trade idea, and then we see prices moving again to the downside, which just brings us now to this massive consolidation at this point, and it's going to be different for me. I'll have to reanalyze, but I'm sticking with this one. I'm sticking with these buyers for prices to move to the upside on the DXY, and having these buyers, I'm just going to look at other asset classes. The first pair or the first asset class I'm going to look at, I'm going to look at the indices, and the first one I'm looking at is the US30. So looking at US30, I'm just going to stay on the hourly time frame. So we've had this move on the hourly time frame. We had this test of 38,000. So price made a move from 39,000 right here. We had a massive drop to the downside, a consolidation here. There was an inability for price to take out 38,000, and we had this rejection at this point. Buyers came in impulsively, and ever since we've just seen this slow movement to the upside, and we're testing 39,000. Now the interesting thing about US30 is once we had a test of 39,000, we didn't go past this point, and price didn't really close above this point, and you can see there was this rejection again from the sellers. So going off of what is happening on the DXY, I'm expecting this move to come in as a buy. We first of all look for, say, a possible pullback. It might be a shallow pullback, but we should see buyers coming in. Then I should expect some sales to come in on US30, and because we're rejecting again at this point of 39,000, I'm expecting a slow move again to say an area like 38,000. So this is the next target for me on US30, but it's a very massive move that's probably coming in, and this just depends on what is going to happen on the DXY. If this has to move impulsively and aggressively to the upside over time, we should see US30 dropping to 38,000. And if the opposite thing happens on the DXY, then it might be difficult for US30 to drop. So the point of interest for me on the DXY is this area right here. So if I have to, say, participate on this move coming into next week, I'll probably want to see some kind of pullback, because getting in here, the risk to reward might not be that good. But if we get a pullback on this, and then I'll probably look for those sales, and if we start taking out this level, then we should see prices making its move down to 38,000. So it just depends on what is going to happen again, and the opposite thing can happen as well. So if this doesn't happen and we see buyers coming in impulsively, so let me clean this real quick. If these sales do not come in, so let's say these buyers continue with this move to the upside, then we could see the DXY making a move. Sorry, we could see US30 making a move to, say, this area above the 39,000. We get a pullback to test the 39,000, and we could see prices heading to 40,000. So that's a possibility as well. But for now, I'm still sticking to sales on the DXY. That's the primary buyers for me. Get some kind of a pullback, and then I look for these sales to come in on US30. Now let's look at NAS100. So with NAS100, this is a very interesting one. So I had these buys, I think from here I took the buys to this point. Right now we're consolidating at this point, so we're having this rejection at this point. So we had a move from the buyers, but if you look at it, it was like it came in a very choppy way. It's not as impulsive as you should expect, say comparing it to an area like this. You see the buys here was like very impulsive. You see this one, the buys were impulsive as well to the upside. And if you even compare it to this, you see very impulsive buys. But as price progressed, you start seeing just the slow movement to the upside. So right now, I think on NAS100 there's going to be like a little pause, and that's what I'm saying, just going off of this and going off of what's happening on the DXY. So right now we're testing this area of 19,000, which is this psychological number right here. Price went through, it's tested again, went through, and then we had this push back to this area below 39,000. So overall we're just consolidating at this point. Now this is how I look to attack this pair, and this is how I look to trade it. We might get prices settling below 19,000, and if we get prices settling below 19,000, so let's say coming into next week, it's quite difficult for the buyers to continue to move to the upside. And if we see prices settling, say below 19,000, then we should see some sales coming in. And I'll be very cautious with these sales, because I don't think we might get to 18,000. We could get a considerable pullback, but not to 18,000. And that's just because when you look at this from a higher time frame, I'm just going to shrink this on the hourly time frame, but when you look at this from, say, the daily and higher time frames, you can tell we're still in this massive move to the upside. So even if we get sales coming in on NAS100, I'm not really looking for a massive drop on NAS100. So we could get a shallow pullback, so we could see prices coming in, and then eventually we'll see prices moving again to the upside. So with this one, I'm really going to be patient, and let's say for some reason buyers are still very interested in this, and they keep holding prices above 19,000. If we see prices struggling at this point, then I'll prepare for some buys, just depending on the setup I see coming into next week. So that's it for NAS100. I'll be patient with this one. Now with the S&P 500, now this one looks better for me if I have to take sales. So you can see we've had prices moving to the upside, higher highs, higher lows, just sticking on the hourly time frame. And right now we have this consolidation at this point, similar move to what's happening on NAS100, consolidation. But with the S&P 500, because we went through like 5,300, we went through this point, I'm still expecting prices to test this area. So this right here, the S&P 500, is a pair I'll probably look for selling opportunities, and that just depends again if the DXY decides to move to the upside. This is a pair I'll probably look for selling opportunities, get something to say 5,300. Once price gets to 5,300, if I see a consolidation at this point, then I'll look again for an opportunity to go to the upside. So I think we might trade within this area coming into next week, a push to the downside, and then another move again to the upside. Now if this doesn't happen, and let's say the sellers come in really impulsively, if the sales are impulsive, and then we could see a move to 5,300, a slight rejection at this point. And if we go through this point, and then I'm looking for a test at this area, and then a possible move to the downside. But this move is just like, it's gonna take time. So if I have to get into any positions coming into next week, this area right here is the point I'm looking at. A drop to this point, that's the sell I'm looking for, and after this I'll make a decision as to what I'm going to do. So that's it for the S&P 500. So finally, let's look at gold. So with gold, now this is going to be a very difficult one to work with, simply because we had this massive consolidation on gold. We had this move to the upside, and there's some kind of a trend that has been building up here. So when you look at it closely, I'm just sticking on the hourly time frame again. You look at this closely, we had price moving to the upside, higher highs, higher lows. There was a trend in here that got violated. Now we had an impulsive move from the sellers. So with this impulsive move, price brought us back to 2300, which is at this point. So this is my take on gold. It might be difficult to get something from this coming into next week, simply because the move from gold has been very massive. But when you string this chart, so if I do this, you realize we've been playing within 2400 and 2300. So I need to be very careful coming into next week looking at this pair, simply because we might see a pullback coming in, and then we get a shallow sell. So it just depends on what is going to happen. So let's say prices pulled back into this area, then I'll be looking for a test of this area, and that could give us a possible move again to the upside. But if we pull back to this area and we get those sells dropping, so we come back below 2300, we start getting a test of this area, then we could see gold making new lows. So again, it depends on what is going to happen. But because we had this massive move coming in, I need to be patient because it's going to take time. So we need to get a good pullback to join these sells, or we get a rejection at 2300 and we see price moving back to the upside. And this is simply because we've just been trading within this area. 2400 crashed to 2300, it moved to 2400, back to 2300. So we're still within this massive consolidation. If you look at even higher time frames, we're still within this area. So it just depends on what is going to happen here. And if we get, say, a rejection from the buyers, if the buyers reject at 2300, we should see prices moving back to the upside on gold. So this is the pair I think I'll probably have to wait coming into next week. I need to see more price action to make sense of what is actually happening on this pair, because we had this move, massive pullback, we've made lows, but when you look at the lows, it's quite shallow compared to the pullback that came in. So it's very shallow. Now this hasn't ended, so there's a possibility as well. All right, so this is something, yeah, so there's a possibility as well. So we might see prices testing 2300, and if we see price testing 2300 and there's this rejection again from the sellers, then we could see gold crashing again, and this is going to tie with the DXY. If we see the DXY moving again to the upside impulsively, then we could see gold having this crash. So coming into next week, yeah, quick take on this. I'm expecting sales to come in on US30. I'm expecting some sales on NAS100, but not as compared to US30. So the sales on NAS100 probably be a shallow sell. Again, it might go really deep, but I'm expecting a shallow one. With the S&P 500, I'm expecting sales as well to test 5300, and I'll probably see the reaction here and then go in for a buy, or if it goes through, take this to the downside. With gold, I'll sit quiet on this one just a little bit to see what happens at 2300. If we get a rejection at this point, then we could continue with the move to the downside. However, if prices move back into this area, we could get a test of this, and we see prices moving again to the upside. And with the DXY, I've done this already. My primary bias on this is to see prices continuing with this move to the upside, simply because we had this massive move coming in on Friday. So we could get pullbacks and we see price moving to the upside subsequently. However, if this doesn't happen, the next area I'm looking at is 104, and the DXY could drop back to 104. So if all these things just start playing out, and then we'll start taking the trades accordingly. And that's it for this week, guys. If you found this interesting, again, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Use the comment section, tell me what pairs you're looking at, what pairs are most favorable for you to trade. What's your take on the DXY? What's your take on the S&P, NAS100, US30, or gold, or even other currency pairs, or pairs like GBPUSD and stuff, Euro USD? Use the comment section. Just let me know what you're looking at coming into next week. All right, guys, thank you. See you during the next one. Bye for now.